Welcome to the Throne podcast. This is Dan Santana.
This is Dakota Kingry.
Dakota, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you all for joining us today. Just want to remind you to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And also, if you are on Apple Podcasts, rate and review. That would be great. That helps us get out there into the world. Shows Apple that we're real.
5 stars.
5 stars, yeah. If you're going to rate it less, then just don't rate it at all.
Yeah, don't bother.
And I think if you took the time out to rate it, you probably
Give us a good Yelp review.
That's it. Yes, we want Yelp to really know
yes
what we're doing. Anyway, So thank you for joining us today. We want to talk about a few things, but first we released something.
Yeah, we released the To the Throne Pixel Tee.
We did.
Came out super. It's a great color combo.
Mm-hmm.
Little off-white shirt with some very fluorescent orange, which is my favorite color. Very fluorescent.
A good fall color.
It's perfect fall color.
Exactly.
And you look at the shirt and it's like blinds you almost. It's one of those, I don't know what the actual term is. I've been trying to figure this out for a little while. But there's a term like in graphic design with 2 color combinations that really like it makes like the science behind it is it makes your brain like actually vibrate, like something in your like neurons in your brain actually vibrate when you see these 2 color combinations.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's one of those because you look at it and it's like feel like it's buzzing almost.
Awesome.
Which is great.
It is amazing. You got to see it in person.
Yes.
I think if you look on our Instagram, if you've seen it or you go to the website, the pictures can't almost do it justice.
Yeah, it looks great, but in person it's like,
Yes.
oh my gosh.
It pops in person.
It's like a traffic cone. It's really great.
Yes, if you want to wear a traffic cone, it has some style to it.
I wear it. It's great.
Oh, it's amazing. So, Pixel Tee, it's awesome. And also, this is our episode number 7, right?
007.
007. And also today, this is Friday. Today, this weekend is the release of a movie,
Dun, dun, dun.
007.
Yes.
And first off, we both love that series. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's
Daniel
incredible.
Craig, phenomenal. But what a cool thing that our episode 007 is on the release weekend of 007.
We did not plan that.
Not at all.
I mean, we could take credit and say that we did.
Wait, let me erase what that
Yes.
no,
We're just going to cut that out. No, we didn't plan it, but it's totally fitting.
for sure.
Especially like the timing wise, it's crazy. And the fact that we decided to go with like triple digit names.
Yes.
Or like, the numerical triple digit thing. And for it to be double, it's like poetic.
Amazing.
It's really great.
Super poetic.
So I'm sure we'll go see it.
Right.
But yeah, dude, it's great.
And there's
It
a ton of
fits.
things I love about like 007 growing up. So that was one of the things that growing up, my dad and I would watch, the older ones.
Yeah.
And then when the newer ones would come out, like he'd take us to the movies and see the new ones because he's a huge 007 fan.
Really?
Love James Bond. Love Sean Connery. Like,
Sean Connery.
Yes.
The Rock.
R.I.P.
Dude, that movie's so good.
And there's just things about 007 like that are just iconic.
Yeah.
The suits that he wore, the style,
cars.
the cars, the Aston Martin. I mean, it's just amazing and really helped me like growing, like looking at design in a different way. It just had this classic aesthetic,
Yeah.
right?
It's very timeless.
For sure.
And you think about how long like that franchise has been around. It's like been 50 years,
Yeah.
That all the old movies, Goldfinger and all these like classic. Think about how there's been a lot of Bonds and they've all been
Pretty good. There's a few that are a
very
little
good.
weird.
Yes.
But
But you think about like the Bond, the role of Bond,
Yes.
it's very iconic.
It
It's
is.
like one of the most, if you think spy movie, you immediately think Bond, right? You think,
yes.
if you think action movie, a lot of times in that conversation is immediately Bond, of course. You think action hero, it's, well, of course, James Bond.
Right.
Who else, So it's a very iconic thing. And I think you mentioned it. The design in those movies and the aesthetic and really everything, like they go to insane lengths to make sure these movies feel, which is, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
So I personally think Daniel Craig is the best Bond ever.
I mean, He's
there's
amazing.
no question.
There's a question.
There's no question to me.
There's a question. A lot of people would argue, of course, Sean Connery.
Yes, Sean Connery.
And even
great.
Roger Moore. But, I mean, for today, this is how it always is. This is the LeBron Jordan conversation.
What's his face? What's the other one?
Pierce Brosnan.
Yes,
who was more recent.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But,
We won't talk about him.
No, he was good. The four he did were pretty good. But when you go back and look at it, I thought GoldenEye was great. But when you go back and look at him, some of them got cheesy.
I have some arguments as to why
90s.
Daniel Craig's is better.
Well,
but
Daniel Craig is amazing. And what's great about him and his role is that, typically Bond is a tall,
yes,
like dark-haired
guy.
Yeah. So you're talking 6'2", 6'3".
Yes.
Everybody's that.
Yes.
Pierce Brosnan fit that to a T.
Yeah, most of them did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Daniel Craig's like 5'9".
Right.
And has blonde hair, blue eyes. Doesn't fit.
Yeah. Before we get too far into this, if you haven't known yet, but we're in this episode is going to be a little bit different.
Sure.
We're talking about things that influence us. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we always come back to is design and aesthetics and that sort of thing. So if you've listened this far of us just rambling on about James Bond, it's for a reason.
Yes.
And so James Bond influences us, and obviously 007. So maybe it connects in your brain now.
It does.
But I actually watched a documentary about Daniel Craig and him being James Bond, and it was incredible. Like some of the things in there, I heard, because we've watched the movies, right? You just said before, we're sort of fanatics about it, and we've waited a long time for this last James Bond film.
Right.
It's been, I think the last one was 2015.
I think Spectre, yeah.
Yeah, Spectre was 2015. And so that's
a long 6 years.
6 years.
It's a long time. But I mean, it got delayed because of
right.
COVID
There was a lot of things that
got
delayed, but we've been waiting for this film, and the previews look insane. So we can't wait to see it. But we've watched the films over the years. We talk about them all the time. And so, anyways, I watched this documentary, and I found a lot of things that I did not know about specifically Daniel Craig's James Bond role. And I'm watching this documentary. I'm like, oh my gosh! Like, I look at these movies that have influenced me in a lot of ways. I think as designers and as creatives, everything that influences us is just things that we consume, right? Things that we just, whether it's based on our childhood or experiences that we've had, like everything around us influences us, right? And so I'm thinking about this franchise and how great these movies have been and how like iconic some of these scenes have been.
Right.
And how I'll even go back and reference some of them in conversations, or like I'll see something and be like, oh, that looks like Casino Royale, or stuff like that. And so I have this very polished perception of what these movies, like I've experienced, right? And they've all been so good. And I actually watched this documentary, and I heard things that I was like, wait a second, this doesn't line up with my perception of what these movies, like, it doesn't align. And I actually, like, they were referencing some things, and they said, one of the first things that stuck out to me that was insane to me is that when they announced, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when they announced the Daniel Craig was going to be James Bond, people were like, wow, it's the first blonde Bond. That's hard to say. Blonde, say that a billion times fast. Blonde, I still can't even do it slow.
We get it.
Blonde Bond. They were like, it's the first one. They were like, oh my gosh, it's great. But when they did the first press interview, and they, like they have a panel with like the director and the writers and him, obviously. After that interview, all of the media said that he was going to be an awful Bond. And the media like tanked him. Like they literally were like, he's not Bond.
Right.
And I don't know if this was just American media,
or
but
British
just British media. It seemed like it was just in like the UK and stuff. But they literally went after him and said that he was underwhelming, that he didn't fit the role, that he wasn't right for the part, that he couldn't do it, and that he was disappointing. Like the media literally said he was disappointing.
Wow.
And they hadn't even seen the movie yet, but immediately they were like, he's disappointing. And so like to see those two things, this great franchise that I've like grown up watching and be like, oh my gosh, these movies are incredible, and I still go back and watch them. And then to say, wait a second, the media said this and this and this about him. There was actually people that made a website, said Craig Not Bond. There's literally craignotbond.com. I don't know if it's still up today, but there's literally, they made a website called dedicated to the fact that Daniel Craig should not be James Bond.
Wow.
So I'm thinking about this and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. A franchise that has influenced me so much to think about that it started that way. That before any of the movies came out, that the media was like, he can't do it. And he's not right for the job. I couldn't believe it. And so like hearing that, it just makes me realize how many times, we look at things and we look at the completion of things. We look at the completion of a design, right? We look at movies that are made or clothes that are released or whatever it is, and we don't see what actually, we don't see the behind the scenes. We don't see the stories of people initially saying,
well, the resistance.
Yes,
right?
The resistance to it.
Right.
And we're just like, wow, this is great. This influences. And so I say all this to say, my point is that I think a lot of times the design that influences us, in our heads, it can come off as, wow, that's amazing or that's perfect, right?
Right.
But what actually it is there's a lot of resistance and a lot of pain and a lot of pushback and a lot of failure has brought this thing to the point of it actually being able to influence us.
Right.
And so I think that really shook a chord in me to be like, it started this way, but I have this perception of it. And who knows how it could have turned out if, it didn't start this way or what it could have looked like if the story had been different, And so that's just something I look at. I think there's a billion stories out there of great designers. I know like Lamborghini and Ferrari and all these, all these great car manufacturers and all these great designers all started with sort of that similar story.
Right.
Having pushback, having resistance, having failure, and then growing to be the most massive influence. Yep. And
I mean, another movie we love is Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh, so good.
And it's that whole tale of, Ford trying to up their game to match Ferrari, which sounds insane, right? But how the resistance came with it, and how the failure came with it.
And they failed years before. Yeah, they tried multiple times. Years.
And even with the group of people they put together to do this, there was still failure within it. But it was this urge to continue to go and to press forward towards the goal that they were trying to reach. So anytime when it comes with the design, and ultimately what they were trying to do was design a vehicle that can beat a Ferrari in Le Mans, which is like almost impossible, right? Yeah. An American car beating
which had never been done before.
Yeah, a supercar manufacturer that is just iconic.
Yeah,
and of course that movie's amazing, and of course they developed it and won.
Yeah,
but the point is that there's always going to be resistance in creativity and design. And I think a lot of it will oftentimes, before we hit resistance, and I think it's just an exercise for us, before we hit the resistance from people, we'll always hit it from ourselves.
Oh, yes.
And many times we hit the resistance from ourselves and we don't even get to the people yet to say they don't like it. So as a musician, for me writing songs, I remember the first time I played my songs for people, which is kind of nerve-wracking. I was a teenager and I'm an open mic night, and I had gone for like months to this open mic night just to go and, gather the courage and watch other people do it. But I had to struggle with that whole thing inside me. Like I had to get past that. This is not a good song, right? Just within myself, because if I don't get past that, then I'll never be able to play in front of people.
Yeah.
And then when I played in front of people, there's going to be people that say, yeah, this ain't a good song, like that happens all the time. But you have to get past you initially. And I think many of us have probably stopped what we've wanted to do in design and creativity, in whatever, but specifically we're just talking about for us, like design and creativity, because it's not where we want it to be. It could be perfectionism. We've talked about that in an earlier podcast. Using what we have and being okay with it, because every single person who's done anything in this world has struggled to get it going, has met resistance always.
Yeah.
It's just the people that succeed they succeed past the resistance, if that makes sense. Like they're strong enough to work their way past that. And the people that don't doesn't mean they're not capable. It just means they have to build that in them.
They haven't pushed through.
Right, to push through that. So that's been one thing for me that we often judge things based on the end result. And I think if we can pull a few good things out of social media, because social media is probably a lot more, it's probably a lot worse for us than it is good, to be honest. It connects us, but man, it just opens up a lot of stuff for us that is probably
exposes a lot.
Yeah, that's probably not good. It also gives us this perception of people that isn't real. So there's comparison, whatever. But one of the good things that when social media first came about and you got to actually see people past the veil, right? You got to see people create some of these things, almost sometimes in real time, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, you get to see your favorite artist like recording a song or working on a song or whatever the case is. And say, oh, no, you can actually see, no, this is actually somebody doing this. It just didn't magically happen.
See the process.
Right. It didn't just magically happen. So I think that is a good thing that came out of it, to show us that for us to be designers, right? Like what defines a designer? What defines an artist? What defines
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I guess so.
I think it's someone who, creates something visually for other people to consume.
Right. And a lot of times it doesn't mean that you're not a designer if no one sees it.
Right.
But design is to be seen.
It validates.
Right.
It.
Creativity is to be seen, whether it's a song or whatever, it's to be heard, and that's part of it too. It's like if you're a songwriter, you write songs, of course, right? You don't think about writing songs, but you write songs, and then you want those songs to be heard at some point.
Right.
This doesn't mean you're not a songwriter again, but the songs in itself are supposed to be a connection with people in the same way, like as we design shirts that we're doing in any of the products, right? Even posts and anything.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to take an aesthetic, a font, a color, right? A background, whatever, to connect people to something.
Yeah.
So I like you said, I need to see that Daniel Craig documentary.
Dude,
I don't know why I haven't seen it.
It's so good. It's on Apple TV.
Exactly.
Go watch it. There's even like the fact there in Spectre, he had broken his leg during that during the filming.
Yeah.
But he kept filming with a broken leg, the whole movie.
Crazy.
And they were like, well, we could stop and like you get surgery and all these things.
Right.
But we would have to take a break for 9 months at least. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, we're going to keep going. So he wore like some super like slim bionic brace.
Wow.
But they talked about how it actually made them reframe the movie to be able to, like, they had to rewrite a little bit of it and shoot it a little bit differently to aid the fact that he couldn't like sprint and do all these things.
Right.
Which is kind of crazy to think about, that he still produced that movie with a broken leg, which is insane. But I think some of the things you said really touched on something that I think is at the heart of really what I wanted to get to personally, is the authenticity behind these things that influence us, and even behind the things that we create, Yeah. I'm a designer. I'll just say I'm a designer. For a long time, I didn't consider myself a designer because I wasn't really doing the things that I personally looked at design that I loved. And because I wasn't creating on that level, I didn't consider myself a designer.
Right.
Which that's kind of crazy to think about, right?
Well, because then no one is nothing until they're a pro.
And so I had to learn, no, I am a designer.
Right.
And I do have something to offer. And I know for a fact that in a year or in 10 years, what I'm creating then will be way better than what I'm creating now. And that doesn't mean what I'm creating now is bad. It's just I'll be on this, everyone is on this ever-evolving sort of journey, or at least most people should be on this ever-evolving journey of trying to get better. But I think for me, one thing I've learned through being a consumer of design, it's everywhere. I can't shut it off in my brain. Like I can't see something that I love and be like, I can't ignore that font, or I can't ignore that color combo, or I can't ignore how they use those shapes, or I can't ignore this fabric and how it's used, or that car and the lines on, the body lines on this car, or the wheel. I can't ignore that stuff. And it's like sometimes my brain goes insane. But what I've learned is through this comparison of saying, like I said, I didn't consider myself a designer until I was creating things that I loved. And that's such a false thing, right?
Yeah.
Because then that creates such a comparison and a copycat mentality, I think. But what I realized is the majority of time that I found things that influenced me were designers who created out of authenticity.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that they were looking at someone else saying, well, I'm not a designer because I'm not creating like that. It was like, no, I'm going to create from me.
Yeah.
And that's actually what influenced me. And I didn't realize that. So for a long time, I was like, well, this influences me and that influences me. But I had to realize, wait a second. Because in that period of time, I was like copying a lot of stuff and I was like ripping off stuff.
Sure.
Which that's
natural.
That's a natural thing, right?
It is.
You can almost...
Imitation is a part of growth.
Create anything... I don't believe that you can create anything completely without influence.
Of course.
You just can't.
No.
The only one who can do that is the Lord.
That's it.
And that's why he is the Lord. But my version, of what I create, it can still be based off authenticity and still get influence. It just isn't a copy. And so I've had to learn that when I create from an authentic part of myself, then I create an authentic work, that represents, an authentic spirit inside me. And like, if we want to get technical and spiritual, because I believe this, when we create authentically, we, like I said, make an authentic work when that speaks to an authentic God.
Yeah.
But when we don't do that, and when we copy, and we create from a copycat mindset and a copycat mentality, then it only speaks, it speaks to the selfish humanity. It speaks to like, well, I'm just gonna rip off this guy, and then the value and the quality is diluted and diluted and diluted and diluted. But what influences me is authenticity.
Yeah,
and so I think that's so important, especially we live in a city of creators.
Yep,
and we are creators, and some people may need to hear that, because I know I needed to hear that. And
sure.
Authenticity, even though even though the authentic part of yourself, creating from the authentic part of yourself, may not look the best. It may not look the most flashy or be the most beautiful.
Right. But
I believe that authenticity creates more influence than something looking better. Right. You know what I mean? Or being more flashy, or being more bold, or it just does. It's got that spirit on it. And it goes way farther.
It's intangible, right?
Yes.
And that whole element of, okay, we come from a creator, right? And an authentic creator. And I mean, if he took the time out to create every snowflake that falls to be different and unique.
Yeah.
And he created every single person to be different and unique. There's got to be that element of we tap into that uniqueness that we all have, that we've been created to be.
Because we all do have it.
We do, and we're also always influenced as well. I look at my kids. I have a couple little kids, right? I have a couple older kids, but I have a couple little kids, that are in that little kid phase where they're sponges to things, right? They see things, they're influenced by everything, right? So of course, as a parent, you got to be careful with, making sure what is around to influence them. But nevertheless, they're influenced by everything. But they also love art and creating, right? And so they can look at these YouTube tutorials on how to draw, right? And all that stuff to kind of copy, to learn the art of drawing, right? Yeah. To learn the skill of drawing. It's probably the skill of art, whatever.
The practice of it.
Right, the practice of it. But that is an empowerment. Just like when we all learn instruments, we learn a song.
Yeah.
that was already written. We're using chords that are already formed.
It gives you tools.
Right. To then use that element to make something new for us. But what I see with little kids and what we lose as adults is that willingness to just be uniquely us when we make a piece of art.
Yeah.
And they are super influenced. Doesn't mean they are not influenced by things, because they are. But they're so focused on just having them be on the paper.
Yes.
Or them be in the song, or them, however, whatever art piece it is. And we lose that as adults. We get consumed with other people. What other people are going to think?
Yes.
Is this going to be in line with this thing or that thing?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you ever see a kid draw something and then look at it and be disappointed with what they draw?
No, I want to show everybody.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
And they're like, oh my gosh, look at what I made. That's so funny. At what age do we lose that?
Well, the age that we I don't know, maybe teenager. That whole thing when you realize, wait, people are looking at me now, and that whole middle school mentality, high school, that whole thing. I think that's when we start realizing it's almost in the same way, that Adam and Eve, right, in the Bible were walking, and they didn't know that they were naked. Yeah, right. It wasn't until they sinned that they were like, oh, we're naked. It's a realization that, wait, I'm actually exposed here. Right. Wait a second. And then what do? They hide. Yeah. And that's, to me, it's like, not to put any heaviness on this, but I do think that hiding is more in the sin nature, or is more sin nature than authenticity is, is freedom in who we are. And many times we live in that hiding element. We're Adam and Eve after we've sinned. And we're so focused on us, and that's the issue. It's like we're more focused on us than we are on what we're doing, what we bring, what we offer, who we're around. They were walking with God in the garden. And when the awareness became on them, that's when they actually were like, we got to cover ourselves up.
Well, it's scary.
It is.
And it speaks to some of the other things that we've talked about, perfectionism, all these things.
Yep.
But speaking of kids, you talked about kids. I've got 2 little kids as well.
You do.
But speaking of kids, go back to yourself as a kid. And look at what influenced you. As far as, we're talking about design, we could talk about other things, but what influenced you as design? Because I have this fascination of like trying to look at, I've realized it more and more over the years of seeing how I grew up and some of the experiences I had. Right. And now being like, wait a second, I understand why I like this now. And I understand why I have the taste that I have now. And then comparing to other people who don't have the same taste and don't have the same, perspective on some things that I do. Like I remember I was sitting and talking to this friend, and I asked him to explain to me like a color. There was like a vase or something on this coffee table, and I was like, what color is this? All right. Because I'm obsessed with colors. Obsessed. And I was like, what color is this? And they were like, it's pink. And I'm like, no, it's not. And and they got irritated, and I'm just like, it's not pink. This is mauve. and I like gave this really fancy, right. In my opinion, I gave an accurate description of what the color was. Sure. And they're like, no, it's pink. And I'm like, what? Well, I can't. And so I had to like explain to them, no, this is why I think there's way more than just pink and red and blue. And so I realized that awareness for color, and that awareness to say, no, that's not just green. It's like, that's a sage mint. That's between sage and mint, Right. Came from my mom and how I grew up, and she's a designer and all these things. And so I guess for you, what influences do you remember as a kid looking at things and being like, I like that?
Yeah. Well, my house was a music house. It was full of music. Yeah. And my dad was a musician, since I can remember. Like, he first started playing the guitar, I think at 10 is when he learned. So, music was always in the house. Music was always on drives, like long car drives to wherever, Florida, to go to Disney World or, whatever we were doing. There was just always music on. And back in the Chicagoland area where I'm from, there was my dad, and it's so funny because it's like, it's this thing where it's the foundation of my childhood, but it's also kind of a hilarious thing that people make fun of now, which is smooth jazz. It's like elevator music, you know?
I love smooth jazz.
Exactly. It's great. And a lot of it is there's no like lyrics, right? It's just all music based. It's super music based. Instrumental, a lot of lead line stuff. You know, you got to be creative in that. When you have no vocal, you have to keep people engaged for 4 minutes. So you have to have engaging lead lines that are almost like vocal lines, you know? Right. And so growing up, I would memorize the not the vocal lines in these, but the actual lead lines. So I can sing the guitar parts, which is a strange thing, you know? I can sing the guitar parts and the piano parts and stuff. Like that was, to me, that was like somebody singing. Yeah. You know, it's voicing, of course. So that to me influenced me on everything. And even the vocal lines and guitar stuff, guitar's coming back in music, which is great. But what I'm drawn to is really strong lead lines of things that are memorable. And I think we all are. It's that hook, that whole thing. But there's just some lead lines that are just so strong, some melodies that are just so strong. And melody for me came from smooth jazz, which is strange, right?
That's funny.
And even to this day, like when I hear that type of music, you know, I actually like instrumental music. There's something in it. You know, you look at Mozart, and you even look at Bach, and you start looking at these older, we would call them
masterpieces,
right? Forms of music, no lyrics. Mm-hmm. They all have to be in by dynamics and by voicing have to keep you engaged. So for me, voicing really influenced me in, like I said, long car drives, but also movies. Yeah. Movies, huge things. Going back to Bond, because it's 007, so we got to keep it.
007.
Right, we got to keep it with Bond for a minute. What I love about, you know, Ian Fleming was the author of these books and stuff, and that whole element of Bond. But what I love what they did with them is that they're spy movies, right? They're you know, they're action movies. There's some intelligence in it, right? There's things, right? And some of it too, you know, it's UK, so it's got that UK vibe too, which I think is cool, especially, you know, being an American. You know, you get that European kind of feel, which I think is great too. It always feels more fancy, right? Always feels more proper.
Broadens your horizons a little.
Yes. It makes us all feel like a bunch of hillbillies here for some reason, no matter where we're from.
Start talking in an accent after you watch the movie.
But, you know, what I love about it is the intentionality they took with it, and that they have all these opening sequences and all these songs. Yeah. That are part of these opening sequences that are works of art in itself.
Well, they're legendary. The title sequences of Bond movies are legendary.
They're amazing.
Yes.
They're pieces of art just in themselves. Yes. So that's what I loved about it. It's like the experience of going to see a movie. You get to see an intro scene that leads into this like experience of a song, a unique song by artists that we all know too, which is great. You know, of course, Billie Eilish, you know, is this this movie song, No Time to Die.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
Well,
that.
they came out with the song last year. Like, her and Phineas wrote it, and it's been out already for a year because it was supposed to release last year, but whatever. Great song. Perfect voice. Perfect. I mean, just amazing. Yeah. But I'm so excited to see what they do visually with it.
Oh, I can't wait.
You know? But those type of elements, to me, are just, I mean, they almost transport me to somewhere different. Yeah. And I think good art does that. So, again, listening to smooth jazz on a long car drive, looking out the window, right, without any smart devices or anything. Right? So, like, the only thing you have is smooth jazz and trees or something, right? Like, made me transport into other places. Yeah. And I think that to me was a big influence. Like, how do I make art that can actually make someone feel like they're somewhere else? Wow. Which seems kind of crazy.
I get it.
But it transports you, and I think that's what really good art does. Like, it just, like, it's intangible. Yes. Like, you could feel it, though. You could be like, man, this takes me somewhere. Yeah. You know?
It really does. Yes, I get it. Like, there's albums for me. Hillsong United Empire's album does that for me. Yeah. Immediately when I hear that song, I go back. I'm walking the streets of Echo Park in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I've got Bose headphones on, and I'm wearing a long green trench coat. Mm-hmm. And I'm wearing, like, these red Kobe's, like Kobe basketball shoes. I'm walking to Subway, and I'm going to Subway to get a chicken bacon ranch foot long. And that's where that album takes me. Like
Right.
zero, like immediately I'm like, yep, I'm there. It's so crazy how like things can do that. You actually like, so it's like, it's a timestamp, you know? It's like,
Yep.
here it is. It's a mental picture of things. I've got things even like that of, imagery. Like there's certain fabrics. Like I remember my mom would always have this. She always had these two chairs, and they were like lounge chairs. They were like fancy. I call them fancy chairs. I don't know what the proper.
It's probably not
term.
proper.
I don't know what the proper term.
Some fancy chairs.
It's almost like not a chase lounge, but like I don't know. But they were like this.
I think the proper name is chaise now.
Chaise.
But whatever. I keep hearing people say that. I'm like, man,
chaise.
It's not chase.
Anyways.
Okay.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
But they were these like maroonish, and they had like these little tiny squares on them with like orange like interlaced in the fabric. She had two of them. She would never get rid of them. I don't know why. She just loved these chairs.
Yeah.
And so they went from house to house with us growing up, and like, but anytime I see something that's like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, takes you right back. Takes me right back to being, because they would have these chairs like in their sitting room, in their master bedroom. So it takes me back to what that room looked like, and all these things. It's like there's so many influences like that I have, and it's funny because now as an adult and as a designer, I pull from those things now, and it's cool because I'm not that old.
Yeah.
But I've lived a lot of life, and I've been a lot of places. And it's cool because now I can pull from experience.
Right.
So instead of looking out into the internet and being like, yeah, here's this great picture that I don't really have any sense of connection with.
Right.
It looks great, but I don't have really any sense of connection with. I can actually start to pull from my memories. And I can pull from experiences as a child, or experience I had living in Los Angeles, or experience I had living in Chicago, or in DC. All these things. It's fascinating, and I think that is what creates some of the authenticity that we're talking about. Because it then is like, well, you're creating from yourself. You're not creating from a screen or an image you got off of Pinterest. Which I have to admit, I have to watch myself because I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Because Pinterest is incredible. But, yes.
I think making personal experiences really add to, of course, their personal experiences.
Because I think those are the things that actually allows the consumer to be taken places.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Because you've been somewhere.
Yes, and there's no tie to it.
Yeah.
Because, the seed of something is like, you plant a seed, it's going to grow into this what the seed is. You know? You plant a seed based off of your own experiences. Yeah. And you're creating from something you went through.
Exactly.
Then people are going to feel that on the other end. Yep. Without a doubt.
So I think as, maybe people listening are a new designer or new to creativity in whatever. In general. Right? Whatever.
Everyone's creative.
Yes.
Some way or another.
I mean, cooking, you love to cook. Cooking, there's design in that. There's so many things and so many elements. I mean, you can use this sugar, you can use this sugar, you can use this. I mean, there's so many elements that you can really work in design. It's the same thing as everything we do, but nevertheless, and even scents, by the way, take us places.
For
that,
sure.
Right?
That's a good one.
Scents really take us somewhere.
That's a strong one.
But it's also design. Somebody,
someone designed that.
A cologne, a perfume, or whatever of a parent or something can transform transport you to some place, and somebody had to sit down and work at that.
It's all design.
Right, and make sure that this is the elements that they want to put in it that create this scent. So, but anybody listening, no matter where you're at, but maybe this is for newer people that are newer to a craft, I guess, or to some sort of skill that they're developing for design. I think a good way to keep that childlike wonder that we all had that. We all had it at some point of our life, that we know that creativity. We all did. Kids are very similar, and they just kind of all do the same thing, and they kind of every kid wants to show the art thing that they just drew, and no matter how good or bad it is, whatever, coloring, not in the lines, and it's all black. But they're like, look what I did, you know? But it's unique, and it's from them, and they're doing something. So I think we have to tap into that. But I think a practical thing if we can give some practical steps here, I guess.
Of course.
Because we're still growing and we still have to remember our childlike
Not even close
wonder.
to where I want to be.
Yes. But we also are actively doing it too, so that's a good thing. It's like we're actually putting things out there and creating. But I think a good step is make some, like for me, I brought up I was taking these long car rides listening to smooth jazz, right? But really what formed me is the 15-minute drives I had to church 3 times a week with the smooth jazz.
Yeah.
So that happened way more often in my local environment, than a long trip that formed me, if you will,
the consistency of it.
Yeah, it happened more weekly. And so my advice would be, if possible, travel to places, right? Because that always helps you get new perspectives on things and makes you feel like a child.
Yes.
Like whenever we travel and we go see something new, we have that wonder
It makes you feel small.
Yeah, and there's some new things to consume. But if you can't travel far, there are many places around you within a half an hour that you've never been. There's many roads you haven't driven down, right? Yeah. There's many things you haven't seen, even because we're often creatures of habit and we take the same way every time to this grocery store or wherever, take a different way. See another neighborhood, go find, there's places all the time.
Stretch your brain.
As we moved here, over the past few years, we still are doing that. Like there's still so much to see.
Yeah.
And we've been around, but there's things where I'm like, you almost feel like, the world stops at where you've gone, how far you've gone.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, there's nothing further south here because I haven't gone south. But then you go, it's like, oh, wait, no, there actually is things south here,
Yeah.
And so I think to keep our childlike wonder, we should get out into the world and consume something new.
Yeah.
Listening to new music, there is that point. I fought it as I've gotten older, and I'm going to continue to fight it for the rest of my life. But there's that point that I've seen, there's parents we've seen and grandparents where they get to a certain age and an era,
just stop.
And that's like their fashion stopped, their music listening stopped, and it's like, you get to the 70s and then nothing in the 80s and 90s or whatever it is. It everything else is, no, it's the 70s, you know? And you just, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
I've always, and maybe it's just because who I am, I don't know. But I've always I'm into, the things I've been into, and I'm definitely fine with that. Because, hey, I wasn't around when the Beatles were making music, but I love the Beatles. So I'm into it. But I'm also into the newest music that just came out yesterday, and I'm like, to me, it's like, even if I don't totally connect with it, because I do think Gen Z's making a lot of music now that I'm not connecting with.
Yeah.
Because I didn't.
A lot of it's bad.
Well, yes. I mean, to be honest, so I'm not going to connect with that. But even some of the struggles, it's like I didn't have to deal with that because I didn't have a smartphone and Instagram, when I was 12.
Yes.
So I didn't have to deal with that. But some people, that's what they've known.
Reality now.
So now songs are about that. And relationships are about Snap and about things that I'm like,
weird.
I didn't have to use Snap. I just talked to somebody in person, So, and I'm not that old, but that's just how the world is quickly, the world's working. Where
I don't have to deal with that either.
Exactly. You're not even old. So that's what I mean. So practical steps are, get out in the world and listen to new music, see a new movie. And I think we often see new movies, but you know what I mean? Widen it just like a child.
That's
a child
really
wants to just see things and
wanna
wants to
do
go
stuff.
somewhere.
Yeah.
They just want to go somewhere.
I'll even build off of that.
Go ahead.
Because I'll give a practical tip as well. And I can use the same analogy.
Cool.
I think, like you said, a kid is like, here, I drew this, and it looks awful, but I'm so proud of it.
Yeah.
And I don't even know it looks awful, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I love is, even before that, a parent is like, here, take these 2 colors in this piece of paper and go make something.
Yes.
And so I think something that's been really helpful for me is to put constraints on what I create.
Mm-hmm.
Because that not always, right? But if I tell myself, you can only use 2 colors, go make something.
Yeah.
It stretches me and it forces me to make something that I love, something that I think is great with just 2 colors, or 2 shapes, or, here, give me 1 marker and a piece of paper and make something that I love. Mm-hmm. It stretches you so much because then it's the road analogy. You're like, it stops here, because I think sometimes I know I'm guilty of it. I've gotten into this thing as a designer sometimes where I'm like, I'm gonna use the same fonts, same techniques, same palettes, all these things. And when I started to broaden my horizons and create outside of these things, but with less tools and more limitations, it actually forced me to be like, no, I can't use that same font I've used. I can't use Helvetica Bold all the time. You know what I mean? Which is a font, by the way, if you don't know. All right, I can't use this colorway or this colorway, or I can't use this texture, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, but in that creates way more pathways for me to then say, well, I actually really like this, and this feels really good to me, so I'm going to go this way. And it's totally different, but it stretches me, and then it broadens scope of what I can actually do and have the ability to. So that's a practical tip too.
I think many people already have built-in constraints.
Yes, but even put more constraints.
Right.
Because sometimes you can...
Well, don't be afraid of it.
Yes.
That's part of it. Because I think it's people don't do things because they're constrained.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And we've talked about it. Use what's in your hand.
Think about it. The kid that you gave 2 crayons to and a piece of paper didn't think, oh, I only have 2 crayons.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I have 2 crayons.
Exactly. They see it. It's half empty or half full.
And they went and made something that they loved.
That's it. And it happens all the time.
Yes.
Go to a restaurant with some kids and they give them
Draw on the tablecloth.
They give them 3 colors. Well, no, they give them 3 colors in a little booklet.
Yes.
And that's all they need.
Yeah.
And they'll sit there and do stuff.
You know what I love too is if you give 2 people those same things, you're not going to get the same outcome.
Yep. Or you shouldn't.
You shouldn't unless they're identical twins or something. Or something weird. I don't know.
But even then, you shouldn't.
Right? But you shouldn't. Because one person is probably better at working with constraints than the other.
Yeah.
Or one person has worked with these colors more than the other. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I love is you can actually, I think this is funny. And I love that I just remember this because this validates some of the things that we've said. Mm-hmm. Little story. When I was I was probably 5th grade. Guitar Hero was huge.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I wanted a Guitar Hero for Christmas. And I asked my parents, I'm like, Mom, Dad, I want Guitar Hero for Christmas so I can, play video games. Mm-hmm. And, we didn't really have a lot of money. But one thing I love about my parents and something that I appreciate so much to this day is they never did something that was, it seemed like they never did anything the same as other kids.
Right.
Like I would grow up and I would ask for things like Guitar Hero for Christmas. And my parents were like, we don't have a problem with you having Guitar Hero, but we would rather invest that money into getting you an actual guitar. Because kids spend so much time on these video games. I remember we were walking through the store one day and this kid was playing one of those demo of Guitar Hero games and he was killing it. And then my dad looked over to me and he was like, you could be that good, but on a real guitar.
Right.
He's put so much time into that, and it's a video game.
Right.
And so my parents were like, we're not going to get you Guitar Hero. If you want to play guitar, we'll get you a real guitar, and we'll teach you how to play. And at the time, I was like frustrated because I'm like, I just want the same thing as other kids. I want to be a part. But my parents have never done that, and I'm so thankful for it. Because now I know how to play guitar. Mm-hmm. I've been playing guitar for years. And I'm good at playing guitar. And who cares about Guitar Hero right now? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure a few people do.
Yes, but
the trend is...
But I'm saying that to say, like, I think sometimes we want these things, right? We want the Guitar Hero. We want the video games, but if we look at the things that we have that may be different, I think you can give, like I said, you can give someone the same tools and they create something different because it's based off your experience. It's based off the things you draw from. So don't despise what you have.
Yeah.
Because you can actually create something great with it, And it may be, the funny thing about that guitar is it was the worst guitar ever.
Yeah.
It was like some cheapest guitar. It was like a $50, Fender Strat ripoff. But I remember my dad saying to me, he said, because there was this time where I was like, this is the worst guitar ever. And I was frustrated.
Be grateful.
I was like, this is the worst guitar ever. I need a better guitar to play better.
Right.
And I remember my dad saying to me, he said, you give B.B. King that guitar, I guarantee he's going to play a lot better than you are.
That's it.
And I was like, oh, okay. Because it's not about the materials you have, you know?
Nope.
So constraints actually can be a great thing.
Yeah.
And for me, they've been a great thing in my life.
I think a good, and not to keep going,
Right.
because at some point, we got to
We'll end it soon.
end it for
Yes.
people. But I think a good exercise for all of us, me, you, everyone listening, we all grew up doodling, drawing, coloring. We all did. I think it's kind of cool that there's like adult coloring books back, which is I think is a cool
Yes,
trend.
That's cool.
Which is nice. But I think we all need to just go grab some crayons and some paper
Yes.
and just create something.
The next time I'm in a
And
group of
design
people, I
something.
want to do that.
And
That'd
just
be fun.
Yeah, and just design something. Doodle, whatever. Who cares what it looks like? You're doing it for you.
Yeah.
And like let that be an exercise of, hey, this is all I need is a few things to create and to be a designer. I believe I'm a person who believes like, anyone can be a designer. A kid can be a designer. I believe I design things. I was always like designing stuff, like little booklets of things and drawing things all the time, I remember I watched growing up, like PBS, this show. I can't even remember the show, but I saw like this robot and like I was in kindergarten and I just wanted to make a life-size version of that robot. So my parents bought some vacuum or something. I took the box and cut it up and made it into that thing,
Yes.
almost like identical.
Yes.
And my teacher saw it. She's like, "You did this all by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah." And here's the thing. That was me imitating something.
Yes.
But I was making it mine. And like I did the work and actually put it together and had the creativity to be like, I want to do this thing. And many times we're so afraid. Like,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
like we live in our thoughts. And I was like so fearless of saying, like I wanted to take it to my kindergarten class. That's how like not fearless I was. I'm like, or whatever. I was fearless, not fearless, but I was fearless. I was like, I didn't have any fear. I'm like, I'm going to take this to my class to actually, so my teacher can see it.
Yes.
For some reason.
That's
I don't
great.
know why.
But you just wanted to show us.
Yes. So I think we all need to just literally get a couple crayons, get a few colors and a piece of paper, and just design something. I think designers, there's a difference between designers and pro designers. You know what the difference is? Pro designers get paid. When you're a pro musician, you get paid to play. That's what makes you a pro, you know? But anyone can be a musician if they start practicing and exercising that. So, this whole thing about design and what influences, we all have influence, of course.
Yeah.
Anyone listening to this right now is influenced by something, and I do believe that, you may not be a designer. This may not hit you like some other people, but we have been designed.
Yeah.
We have been designed. And a matter of fact, we do design stuff every day. It may be a living room that we put together with some stuff from IKEA that we picked out. That's a design. We may not think that way, but like we chose to put this picture on the wall.
Design is just a fancy word to say you took some things and you put something
You
together.
made a choice to present to people.
Yes.
And that's really what it is. So design is everywhere. Maybe it's cooking. Cooking's a big one, where we all have to cook. We may not like it.
I love it.
Right. You love it. Great. Some people don't. But there's design in that. Like we're creating something. You make a burger.
Yes.
Go outside, flip it. But you can put, what are you going to put on it?
There's a great looking burger on my Instagram if you want to see.
For sure. But what are you going to put on it?
Yeah.
You're designing something right there. You think you're not, but that's
You're putting it
literal
together.
design.
It's coming from your brain, and it could be anything. And not to keep going on this again, like you said.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap it up, but
It's wrapped up in 5 minutes
okay, that's fine.
or so.
But just take what you have. Like you said, use a crayon. Take a crayon. I remember when I was a kid,
Crayons are great.
For some reason, I got clay. I had clay lying around, and I knew my grandma had a bunch of candles. So I was like, well, let me just try and make some.
Yeah.
So I would create these little art landscapes out of clay to go on top of candle toppers. For some reason. Why did I do that? I don't know. But I would literally make these landscapes. I remember one of them looked like a fire pit, like, and it was on top of a lid of a candle. Like, why did I make that? I don't know. I had clay and I made it. So came from my brain though. But take something and make it. It's great.
We can all design.
It's great. We can all design. We're all made to design, regardless of what it looks like. So it's just a fancy word for saying you made something. So, but yeah, we hope this is a different episode, but we hope it impacted you even a little bit. If it did, again, share, subscribe. Like you said, we're all made to design. We're designed by a designer, and so just go out and design something. Go make something. So we appreciate you guys listening to this. Like, it means a lot to me. Everybody who listens, thank you for listening and supporting this. It means a lot. It helps us keep going. It fuels it. You know, like I said, it doesn't validate it because we don't do it for validation. We do it because God's told us to. But it's great to hear that people can gain even a little bit from it. So we're just having conversations and hoping people listen. So
that's it.
But speaking of design, there's a new To The Throne website design. It's up. It's been revamped a little bit. It was a little bare for a little while just because of necessity, but put some more stuff on there, made it a little bit more cohesive. It's pretty rad. I don't know. So
it's growing too, which is awesome.
Growing. So it's tothethrone.co, www.tothethrone.co. Go check that out. We've got some stuff on there. I'm going to be adding a lot more.
New Pixel Tee.
New Pixel Tee is on there. Go check it out. We've got some stories, or we have a story on there. More stories come.
That's it.
Coming soon. Podcast is on there. So, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. DM us if this impacted you. And just want to cap it off and say thank you for going to the throne with us. Peace.
Later.